Our gospel lesson today is from the 16th chapter of Luke. It's the first of the 13th verses. Hear with me now the word of God. Jesus said to his disciples, "There was a rich man who had a steward, and charges were brought to him that this man was wasting his goods. And he called him and he said to him, 'What is this I hear about you? Turn in the account of your stewardship, for you can no longer be steward.' The steward said to himself, 'What shall I do, since my master is taking the stewardship away from me? I'm not strong enough to dig. I'm ashamed to beg. I've decided what to do so that people may receive me into their houses when I'm put out of stewardship.' So summoning his master's debtors one by one, he said to the first, 'How much do you owe my master?' He said, 100 measures of oil.' He said, 'Take your bill and just quickly write out 50. Then he said to another, 'And how much do you owe?' He said, 100 measures of wheat.' He said, 'Take your bill and write out 80. The master commended the dishonest steward for his shrewdness, for the sons of this world are more shrewd in dealing with their own generation than the sons of light. And I tell you, make friends for yourselves by means of unrighteous mammon, so that when it fails, they may receive you into the eternal habitations. He who is faithful in a very little is faithful also in much. And he who is dishonest in a very little is dishonest also in much. If then you have not been faithful in the unrighteous mammon, who will entrust you to the true riches? And if you have not been faithful in that which is another's, who will give you that which is your own? No servant can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or he will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and mammon." God's blessings be on the reading of his most holy word. May the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart be always in thy sight, O Lord, my strength and my redeemer. Most people want to be better people. Henry Ford was known for both his frugality and his philanthropy. He was visiting his family's ancestral village in Ireland when two trustees of the local hospital found out he was there, and they managed to get in to see him. Well, they talked him into giving the hospital $5,000. Now, folks, this was the 1930s. So $5,000 in 1930 was quite a lot of money. The next morning at breakfast, he opened his newspaper to read the banner headline, "American millionaire gives $50,000 to the local hospital." Well, Ford wasted no time in summoning the two hospital trustees. He waved the newspaper in their faces. "Well, what does this mean?" he demanded. Oh, they apologized profusely. "Oh, a dreadful error," they said. They promised to get the editor to print a retraction the next day. And it was going to say that great Henry Ford hadn't given $50,000, but only $5,000. Well, hearing that, Ford offered them the other $45,000 under one condition: that the trustees erect a marble arch at the entrance of the new hospital, with a plaque that read, "I walked among you and you took me in." Jesus said, "The people of this world are more shrewd in dealing with their own kind than are the people of the light." So I've entitled the sermon today, "Justifying the Means." You know, long before Judgment Day comes for us, long before we have to give an account of our stewardship, we should be as careful about our responsibilities to the Lord as the Mandarin King to realize that he must be. Secondly, we cannot do ministry alone, which means we have to learn to accept others as God created them to be. We have to make it work. So, justifying the means. Most people want to be better people. Last week I had the opportunity to sing in temple during the Jewish High Holy Days. During the liturgy, they elevate Abraham and Jacob. Now, if you read the Bible, if there ever were two shrewder individuals in this life, it was Abraham and Jacob. Abraham sold his sister, his wife, to the Pharaoh, telling him it was his sister, in order for him to get wealthy. He also haggled, if you remember, on a hillside with God over Sodom and Gomorrah. Jacob cheated his own brother out of his birthright. Yet God was able to use both Abraham and Jacob to build the nation of the chosen people. You know, it's amazing. There was no doubt in anyone's mind that they recognized a gap between faith and practice. And I took out of that service, which was really quite beautiful. We are all sinners, and we all need grace. Nobody's perfect. One good reason to come to church is because it puts us in company with other people who also see that gap between faith and practice. And I believe that everybody here wants to narrow the gap between it. In church, we find people who aren't that much different than we are ourselves, who are on a faith journey similar to ours, and who realize that we're all sinners in need of grace. But we're sinners in a community, and we're all trying to make it work. Now, years ago, there lived a man in a church I served in Western Pennsylvania who took on the responsibility of being our stewardship chairperson. He did an awesome job. And I asked him one day why he was so committed, why he was so faithful to us. His reply was, well, I figure that if I don't give it to the Lord, he may stick out his foot and trip me and take away from me what I already have. Well, Jesus' dishonest manager was such a guy. He's such an outright rascal, he could never be pointed to as a model churchgoer. He can't help. We can't call him a hypocrite because he isn't play acting at anything, and he doesn't appear worried that he isn't living up to a call from God. He's simply looking out for his own hide, and he's quite straightforward about it. But still, his employer, when the manager's cheating out of expected income, can't help but be impressed by this manager's resourcefulness. Now, we can imagine the employer speaking to a friend about the incident, saying, you know, that guy cost me a bundle, but you got to hand it to him for his shrewdness. If only he put that kind of effort into the work that I employed him for. Yes, we can admire his cleverness, but we don't go to church hoping to find people like him as quote-unquote Mr. Church. Now, Jesus has a bottom line. Whoever is dishonest in a very little is dishonest also in much. You can't get any clearer than that. But Jesus also states the application positively. Whoever is faithful in a very little is also faithful also in much. And in those words, it's a description of most of the people we actually meet in church. People who are working hard at being consistent in their approach to both minor and major matters, who admit that no one is perfect. It is good for our souls to be among people we keep striving to be faithful disciples of Jesus Christ, because we cannot do church work, we cannot go it alone. You know, there's an old story from Africa that puts it graphically. An African native went out to hunt, and he ended bagging a huge big elephant. He returned home. He asked for volunteers to help get the carcass back to the village. Well, a large group of villagers, they were thrilled. So they all got together, and they followed him back to the elephant, and they tied ropes around the huge beast, and everybody started dragging it back to their huts, and they were chanting together, "Our elephant! Our elephant! Our elephant!" Well, the chant was too much for the man who had bagged the beast. He yelled at his neighbors. He said, "Stop! Stop! What do you mean? Our elephant. It is my elephant. I killed it. It is mine." "Yours?" they said. "Well, in that case, there it is. It's all yours." And they turned and walked towards home, and he left him with a big problem. The good Lord told this parable because he realized that he needed disciples to do ministry, just as we need disciples to do ours here at Union Church. And so, like the dishonest and shrewd manager, he had to accept him as he was and justify the means by how he did it, because in the end result, we can't do this alone. Jesus was telling this parable to his disciples. He wasn't preaching to the crowds this time. Now, we know that he knew that Judas was very shrewd with the money bag. So, maybe this is one of those pointed kind of tales. We need to learn prudence in handling our responsibilities. Fair enough. There will be a judgment day one day, and unfortunately, we all know that Judas had his. You know, there's a wonderful story that a farmer, many years ago in a village in India, who had the misfortune of owing a large sum of money to the village moneylender. The old and the ugly moneylender fancied the farmer's beautiful young daughter, so he came and proposed a bargain. He would forgive the farmer's debt if he would marry the farmer's daughter. Well, they were horrified by the proposal, but the cunning moneylender suggested that he was going to let Providence decide the matter, and so he told them he would take a black pebble and a white pebble, and he would get a money bag and put them in there, and then she could pull out one. The girl would have to reach in, and if she picked the black pebble, she would become his wife, and her father's debt would be forgiven. If she picked the white pebble, she need not marry him, and her father's debt would still be forgiven. Now, if she refused to pick a pebble from the bag, her father would be thrown into jail until the debt was paid. While standing on a pebble-strewn path in the farmer's field, the moneylender bent down to pick up two pebbles, and the sharp-eyed girl noticed that he picked up two black ones. And he put them in the bag. He then asked the girl to pick up a pebble. Now imagine that you were that young girl standing in the field, and what would you have done? Well, the girl puts her hand in the money bag. She draws out a pebble. But without looking at it, she fumbled it and she dropped it. And it fell on the path, where it was lost among all the other pebbles. And she goes, "Oh, how clumsy of me." But never mind, if you look in the bag for the one that is left, you will be able to tell which pebble I picked. Well, since the remaining pebble was black, it would have to be assumed that she had picked the white one. And since the moneylender dared not admit his dishonesty, the girl changed what seemed an impossible situation into an extremely advantageous one. You know, Jesus said, the people of this world are more shrewd in dealing with their own kind than are the people of the light. Most people want to be better people. Long before Judgment Day comes for us, long before we must give an account of our stewardship to God, we should be as careful about our responsibilities to the Lord as the manager came to realize he must be. Secondly, we cannot do ministry alone, which means we have to learn to accept others as God created them to be, and we have to make it work. That's why we justify the need to the glory of God.